Ever get that feeling like you're wading through a sea of information? You want to understand something deeply, but it's just so dense, so overwhelming.
Yeah, I get that.
That's where we come in. Today we're going to take a deep dive together and try to unpack some pretty complex ideas, hopefully without making your head spin.
Right.
We're going to do that by looking at two texts, The Practice of Self-Mastery Part 1 and Practice Self-Mastery Part 2. And these aren't your typical self-help books. They actually offer a framework for achieving something called personal sovereignty.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's not just a how-to guide. It's more like a map of how to understand yourself and kind of take control of your own life.
Interesting. So where do we even begin with all this? What is it that these texts are actually saying about this idea of self-mastery? Like, what's the core argument?
Well, the big idea here is that self-mastery is like this foundation for, well, they call it authentic enlightenment and existential autonomy. But really, it's about, this very real sense of freedom and control over your own life.
So it's not just about feeling good, but really like having a different relationship with yourself and the world around you.
Exactly. It goes way beyond just, surface level self-improvement stuff. And they stress this point that it's a praxis, meaning it's not enough to just believe in it or read about it. You have to actively practice it and make it a part of who you are. It's like learning to ride a bike. You can read all the instructions, but you only really learn by actually doing it.
Right. So it's more like a way of life than just a belief system or something like that.
Exactly. It's about consistently putting in the effort and integrating it into your everyday actions, rather than just relying on faith or what other people tell you.
So it's not about needing external validation. It's about finding that validation from within yourself.
Yeah. And they contrast this with faith-based ideologies or external validations pretty strongly.
Okay, interesting. So you're not just going along with things because someone else said so or because it's what everyone else is doing, but you're kind of figuring it out for yourself through your own experience.
Right. It's about developing your own internal compass and trusting that. And a big part of that is the idea of continuous refinement. Like you're always working on yourself, always improving your intellectual, emotional, even your energetic faculties,
Energetic faculties.
Yeah, like your ability to manage your energy levels, your focus, things like that. They see it as a process of self-directed evolution, where you're not just being shaped by external forces, but actively directing your own growth.
Wow, that's pretty powerful, the idea that we're not just products of our environment, but we can actually steer our own evolution in a way.
Totally. And one of the big things they talk about is how to move beyond societal conditioning.
Okay, so that's got to be a huge hurdle, right? Like we're all swimming in this sea of societal expectations and norms and all that. How do they address that?
They dig into how these structures we live in, like our culture, education system, even political ideologies, really shape how we think and behave, It's almost like we're given these invisible frameworks that we operate within without even realizing it.
Right, like those unspoken rules about what's considered a good job or what a happy family looks like, all that stuff.
Exactly. And these structures can really dictate how we see ourselves, our self-worth, what we think we can achieve, even our sense of morality. So they talk about reclaiming autonomous cognitive sovereignty.
Which basically means taking back control of your own thinking, right? Not just accepting what you've been told, but actually questioning it and deciding for yourself what you believe.
Yeah, it's about recognizing those filters that society has put on you and actively dismantling them so you can think for yourself.
So it's about shifting from seeking external validation to actually building that inner confidence and self-reliance.
Exactly. Moving away from that constant need for approval from outside sources because, they argue that need often comes from conditioned self-doubt and social reinforcement mechanisms we've been exposed to throughout our lives.
That's interesting.
It's like we're taught to constantly look to others to tell us if we're okay, if we're good enough. Self-mastery is about breaking free from that and developing an unwavering internal compass founded upon self-trust, critical introspection, and existential clarity.
Okay, that's a great image, an internal compass. So how do you actually go about building that internal compass?
Well, they talk about consciously constructing personal codes of conduct independent of societal mandates.
So setting your own rules, basically.
Kind of, but it's not about just being rebellious for the sake of it. It's about really examining your own values,
Yeah.
Figuring out what's truly important to you, what you stand for, rather than just going along with what you've been told.
Right, so it's like taking a step back and actually figuring out what you believe in, not just what you've inherited from your family or your culture or whatever.
Exactly. They make a distinction between inherited cognitive frameworks and those consciously chosen.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they even go so far as to suggest that some societal imperatives are designed for docility rather than intellectual and existential growth.
Whoa, that's a bold statement.
It is. They're basically saying that some of the rules and norms we're taught might actually be holding us back from reaching our full potential.
Huh. So if we're constantly trying to fit in and follow all these rules, we might be stifling our own growth.
Exactly. They talk about recognizing these hidden social mechanisms that foster systemic conformity so we can break free and achieve what they call authentic self-determination.
Okay, so we've got all these external forces shaping us. How do we actually start to understand ourselves better and move toward this self-mastery?
Yeah, that's where the epistemology of the self comes in.
Epistemology of the self. Can we maybe break that down a bit? Sounds kind of academic.
Basically, it's about how we come to know ourselves, And they argue that it goes way deeper than just knowing your basic facts, like your name, your likes and dislikes.
Right.
It's about this unrelenting analysis of one's motivations, behavioral patterns, and subconscious imprints. It's like becoming a detective of your own mind.
So really understanding why you do the things you do. What drives your actions, your emotions?
Exactly. And they say it's not just about awareness, it's about moving towards self-governance.
Self-governance.
Yeah, meaning your thoughts, your emotions, your actions all start to align with what they call an undistorted expression of existential truth, basically your most authentic self.
So you're not just understanding yourself, but you're actually in control of yourself.
Right, and they make this point that commanding one's environment through self-mastery isn't about controlling other people or manipulating situations. It's about achieving this internal equilibrium that allows you to navigate the world more effectively.
So it's about being in control of yourself, not necessarily controlling everything around you.
That's a great way to put it. And that internal equilibrium is what allows you to cultivate personal well-being, self-respect, and autonomous emotional regulation.
Okay, so instead of looking for validation from outside sources, you're finding it within yourself.
Exactly. And they tie this back to societal conditioning, suggesting that seeking external validation is often a result of being deprived of these inner faculties.
It's like we've been trained to look outward for approval instead of trusting our own judgment.
That's exactly the point. And they stress that self-mastery isn't about blindly accepting something. It's an empirical and iterative process. It's like an ongoing experiment you're conducting on yourself.
So you're constantly learning and adapting based on your experiences.
Yes, and it involves continuous refinement of your internal mechanisms. So that includes the intellectual, physical, and energetic aspects.
Okay, so it's really holistic, working on all aspects of yourself.
Right. And it's described as this lived philosophy. It's not just a theoretical thing. It's something you embody in your everyday life.
It's about how you actually live, not just what you think.
Exactly. And by doing so, you become more resistant to external ideological impositions.
Meaning you're not so easily swayed by what other people think or believe.
Right. You have a stronger sense of self, and that allows you to create your own path.
So where does all this lead? Like, what's the ultimate outcome of this self-mastery journey?
They suggest that it leads to a dynamic understanding of existence, where you become this autonomous architect of your own reality. Yeah. You're not just reacting to what life throws at you, you're actively shaping your own life.
That sounds pretty amazing, like you're in the driver's seat of your own existence.
It is. It's about rejecting that reliance on external forces and reaffirming your personal agency.
Okay, so you're not a victim of circumstance, but you have the power to change things.
Exactly. It leads to sustained transformation that's aligned with your self-integrity. So it's not just about changing for the sake of it. It's about becoming more of who you truly are.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, they also talk about this idea of the fallacy of external saviors, which is interesting. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, this is where they get into the idea that both individually and as a society, we often look outside ourselves for answers and solutions. We put our faith in these external saviors, whether that's a political leader, a religious figure, or even just a specific ideology, hoping they will solve our problems for us.
So instead of taking responsibility for our own lives, we look for someone else to fix things.
Yeah. And they argue that this propagation of external saviors actually reinforces this external locus of control where we feel like we're at the mercy of these external forces.
Who we give away our power, in a sense.
Exactly. And they say the societal framework often encourages this dependence on predefined authorities rather than fostering self-sovereignty.
Interesting. So self-mastery is about reclaiming that power, that agency, that ability to direct your own life.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that you have the power within yourself to create the life you want rather than waiting for someone else to do it for you.
Okay, so that makes sense. And they also tie this to the concept of faith, right?
Yeah, they have a pretty specific view of faith. They call it an externalized emotional mechanism.
Okay, so they're not talking about faith in the traditional religious sense.
Not necessarily. They see faith as this reliance on something outside of yourself, whether it's a deity, an institution, or even just a set of beliefs to provide meaning and direction. It's about outsourcing cognitive authority instead of actively engaging in critical thinking and personal understanding.
So instead of blindly believing what you're told, you're actually questioning things and figuring it out for yourself.
Exactly. And they argue that true self-healing and existential fulfillment come from an internal locus of control, where belief is replaced by direct experiential knowledge.
So it's about trusting your own experiences and insights over external authorities.
Exactly. And they believe that by eradicating these savior-based constructs, we can step into a state of absolute self-governance, where we're fully in control of our own lives.
So as you become more self-mastered, these external influences have less of a hold on you.
Right. They lose their power over you. And this leads to what they call existential sovereignty, where self-validation, self-regeneration, and self-directed purpose become the only relevant faculties.
Meaning you're not looking to external sources for validation or meaning. You're finding it all within yourself.
Exactly. You become your own source of truth, your own guide, your own measure of success.
That's a really powerful idea. So to sum it all up, what's the main message or takeaway we can get from all this about self-mastery?
Well, the core message is that true empowerment doesn't come from relying on external forces or beliefs. It comes from cultivating self-mastery.
So it's about taking control of your own life, your own thoughts, your own actions, rather than being controlled by external factors.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you have the power within yourself to create the life you want, to achieve true happiness and fulfillment.
And that involves a lot of work, right? Like it's not just a quick fix. It's an ongoing practice of self-discovery and self-improvement.
It is, but it's also incredibly rewarding. And it's not about being perfect. It's about constantly striving to be better, to learn, to grow.
And to break free from those limiting beliefs and societal pressures that might be holding us back.
Right. And it's about building that strong internal foundation of self-reliance and self-knowledge.
So as you're listening to this, I want you to think about areas in your own life where you might be relying on external validation, maybe seeking approval from others, or looking to external authorities for guidance.
Yeah. Ask yourself, what would it look like to cultivate a deeper sense of internal sovereignty? What if you started trusting your own judgment, your own intuition, your own inner compass?
It's a question worth pondering. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some food for thought.
It has for me, that's for sure.
Until next time.
See you then.